get ready for a spine-chilling journey as we dive into three terrifying tales that will leave you questioning what's real and what's not. From a mysterious woman lurking in the hallways of an eerie apartment complex to a haunted basement rocking chair that seems to move on its own, and a sinister figure that crashes a New Year's Eve party, these stories will keep you up at night. Don't miss out on these true-life encounters with the supernatural. Buckle up and prepare for a ride through the unknown. Have you ever let someone into your home only to question who they really are? A stranger's smile can hide unspeakable intentions. This is the story of a New Year's Eve. You will never forget a night that started with a simple favor and ended with the kind of horror that stays with you forever.
It was December 31st, New Year's Eve. My friend Alex had asked me to watch his dog, Bailey, while he went out of town to celebrate. At 35, I didn't care much for parties or crowded bars anymore, so spending the weekend dog sitting sounded perfect quiet, easy money. Alex, 27, had left early that morning, planning to return Sunday night. His instructions were simple: feed Bailey, walk her twice a day, and keep her off the furniture. Bailey was a small, husky mix, unusually quiet and well-behaved. She was the kind of dog that didn't bark unless there was a real reason, which made the events of that night even more unsettling. I brought just the basics: a backpack with my laptop, some toiletries, and a change of clothes. Alex and I weren't lifelong friends. We'd met through mutual acquaintances and hung out a few times. He offered me the futon in his spare room to crash on while I was there. The day passed uneventfully. I played some video games, streamed a couple of movies, and texted Trisha, my girlfriend. She planned to come over after her shift, which would be past midnight. Alex had given the green light for her visit, jokingly reminding me to keep off his bed. At around 9 in the night, as Bailey and I relaxed in the living room, the doorbell rang. Not expecting anyone, I hesitated for a moment before answering. Standing on the porch was a woman, about 30 years old, wearing a hoodie and clutching a jacket. She smiled politely and said, "Hi, I'm Alex's girlfriend. I left something here I need to grab." Her calm demeanor disarmed me. I offered to fetch it for her, but she declined, saying she knew exactly where it was in Alex's bedroom. I figured it wasn't a big deal, so I let her in. She walked upstairs and pushed Alex's bedroom door nearly shut behind her. Something about the situation gnawed at me. I immediately texted Alex. "Didn't know you had a girlfriend? She's here grabbing something." Minutes passed. No reply. The woman eventually came back downstairs, still holding her jacket. She thanked me and headed for the door. Trying to make small talk, I asked, "How long have you guys been dating?" Without breaking stride, she smirked and replied, "Too long," before stepping outside and disappearing into the night. Uneasy, I called Alex. It took several tries before he answered, the background noise revealing he was out drinking with friends. When I explained what had happened, his tone shifted from confused to alarmed. "What? I don't have a girlfriend? Who was she?" I described the woman, but Alex didn't recognize her. His voice grew sharp. "She went into my room? Check if anything's missing." Heart pounding, I raced upstairs and scanned the room. I couldn't tell if anything was out of place, but Alex guided me over the phone, asking about specific items. Everything seemed to be there. Still, his reaction left me shaken. "I think I know who it was," he muttered after a long silence. "Just make sure she doesn't come back." I didn't press for details. Alex sounded distressed, and I figured it was some messy personal drama. Later, Trisha arrived, and I filled her in on the strange encounter. She was just as unsettled as I was, but we tried to brush it off. Midnight came and went, and we watched the ball drop in relative quiet. Then, around 1 in the night, Bailey suddenly perked up. She stared at the front door, her ears alert, and began growling, a low, guttural sound I hadn't heard from her before. Moments later, there was a soft knock at the door. No doorbell, just knocking. I froze. My gut told me not to answer, and this time I listened. Grabbing my phone, I tried calling Alex again, but he didn't pick up. Trisha and I stayed silent. After what felt like an eternity, the knocking stopped. But the unease lingered. We decided to move to the spare bedroom, locking the door behind us. We'd barely fallen asleep when Bailey's howling jolted us awake. She was at the bedroom door, her tail wagging nervously as she whimpered and growled. And then we heard it. Footsteps outside in the hallway. Light, deliberate steps. 2 sets of them. The doorknob rattled and a woman's voice called out, "Who's in there?" Chills ran down my spine. The voice was calm but off, like someone trying to sound friendly but failing. "This is Alex's house," she continued. "Who are you?" I didn't answer. Instead, I whispered to Trisha to call the police. She nodded, trembling, and quietly dialed. I spoke up, raising my voice to sound confident. "The cops are already on their way. If you're smart, you'll leave now." There was silence, then hurried whispers outside the door. A moment later, we heard retreating footsteps and the sound of the front door creaking open. When the police arrived, the house was empty, the intruders long gone. I explained everything, from the woman earlier that evening to the footsteps in the hall. The officers suspected the woman had stolen a spare key from Alex's room during her first visit. Alex finally called back, still drunk but now fully panicked. After speaking with the cops, he begged me to stay the rest of the night, as he couldn't come home until morning. I sent Trisha home for her safety and barricaded myself in the spare room with Bailey. I wedged a chair under the doorknob, every creak of the house putting me on edge until sunrise. Alex returned earlier than planned, and the 2 of us spoke at length about what had happened. He revealed the woman was likely someone he'd briefly dated a person he had cut ties with after noticing disturbing behavior. What she and her accomplice wanted that night wasn't clear, but the thought of their intentions chilled us both. Alex changed the locks immediately, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the story wasn't truly over.
Sometimes, the scariest part of a story isn't what happened, it's what could have happened. Be careful who you let into your home, because not everyone comes with good intentions. New Year's Eve, a time for celebration, resolutions, and new beginnings. But sometimes, the night carries with it a darker undertone, a shadow that lingers in the corners of the festive glow. For this young lady and her husband, one particular New Year's Eve turned into a chilling memory that haunts them to this day. This is the story of the woman in the hallway, a night that turned from joy to dread in an instant. Buckle up.
It was late, well past 2 in the morning. When my husband and I returned to our apartment after a night out celebrating the new year, the air was bitterly cold, and the streets were quiet, save for the occasional distant sound of revelers. We weren't drunk, just pleasantly buzzed, looking forward to kicking off our shoes and crawling into bed. We lived in a luxury apartment complex on the top floor. Access was restricted, with secure doors, security cameras, and occasionally a doorman. But that night, the foyer was empty. One of the lights flickered faintly, casting an uneasy glow over the lobby as we made our way to the elevator. As the doors slid shut, I leaned against the wall, trying to ease the ache in my feet from a night in high heels. The ride up was smooth, and when the elevator chimed on our floor, I sighed with relief. But as we turned the corner toward our suite at the end of the hall, something stopped us in our tracks. A figure stood in the hallway. A woman, or at least what appeared to be a woman. Her dark, matted hair obscured most of her face, and her clothes were in disarray. She wore a black lace dress, tattered and torn, and her bare feet shuffled across the carpet. At first, we thought she might be drunk, lost, trying to find her way back to her own apartment. But something about her was wrong. She didn't look like any of our neighbors, and we knew everyone on this floor. She moved with a strange, almost mechanical rhythm, stopping at each door and peering into the peepholes. I glanced at my husband. his expression mirroring my unease. "Should we ask if she needs help?" I whispered. "Let's wait," he said quietly. "Maybe she's just confused and will find her way." We stood frozen, watching her. The woman continued her eerie inspection of each door, her head tilting unnaturally as if listening for something. A low hum escaped her lips, a sound that wasn't quite human, somewhere between a growl and a moan. When she reached Tilly's door, I felt a surge of anxiety. Tilly, our elderly neighbor, was a kind but fragile woman who lived alone. I often helped her with groceries and errands, and we'd grown close over the years. The thought of this strange woman near Tilly's door sent a chill down my spine. Without thinking, I called out, "Excuse me. Are you okay?" The woman froze, her body stiffening. Slowly, she crouched to the floor, her movements jerky and unnatural. Then she let out a soft, unsettling laugh that sent shivers up my spine. My husband stepped forward cautiously. "Hey," he said firmly. "Do you need help?" The woman stood up in one fluid, unnatural motion. Her laugh grew louder, turning into a grotesque cackle that echoed down the hallway. She stumbled forward, her head jerking from side to side, and then she stopped. She turned sharply toward our door. With sudden, violent force, she began pounding on it, screaming at the top of her lungs. The sound was deafening, her fists hammering against the wood as if she wanted to tear it down. "Call the police," I whispered to my husband, my hands shaking as I fumbled for my phone. "Hey, stop that," he shouted. And just like that, the woman stopped. She collapsed to the ground, her limbs folding in ways that didn't look natural. Then, she began crawling toward us fast. Her head snapped up, and for a brief moment, I saw her face. Her eyes were black, bottomless pits, and her mouth was smeared with something dark, almost like ink. She growled, a wet, guttural sound, before letting out a hiss so feral it made my blood run cold. "Run," my husband said, grabbing my arm. We sprinted to the opposite staircase, not daring to look back. The pounding of our feet echoed in the stairwell as we descended 2 floors, my heart hammering in my chest. We stopped holding our breath, listening for any sound of her following us. But the only sound was the pounding of my pulse in my ears. After what felt like an eternity, we cautiously made our way back up to our floor. The hallway was silent. The woman was gone. We hurried into our suite, locking every bolt behind us. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the building made my heart race. The image of her face, her blackened eyes and twisted grin, was burned into my mind. The next morning, my husband spoke to the landlord and asked him to review the security footage. But when the landlord checked, there was nothing. The cameras had glitched during the night due to the freezing temperatures. To this day, we don't know who or what that woman was. Was she just a deeply disturbed person? Or was she something else entirely? All I know is that her presence felt wrong, unnatural. A year later, we moved out of that apartment. But every New Year's Eve, I think about that night. The hallway, her laugh, the way she crawled toward us. And I wonder if, somewhere in the dark corners of that building, she still lingers, waiting for the next unwitting soul to cross her path. New Year's Eve is supposed to be a time of celebration and renewal. But for my husband and me, it became a night of terror that left us questioning what's real and what isn't. Who was the woman in the hallway? What were her intentions? We'll never know for sure. But one thing's certain, some memories don't fade with time. They become part of you, a chilling reminder of the unknown.
New Year's Eve has always been a time of celebration, reflection, and new beginnings. But sometimes, the night has other plans, ones that leave you questioning the boundaries between reality and the unexplained. For me, New Year's Eve of 2020 wasn't just the end of a chaotic year. It became a night etched in my memory for something far stranger. It was the last night of 2020, and everyone was ready to leave that year behind. My friend Logan was hosting a house party to welcome in the new year, and I arrived early to help him set up. Logan's parents were away for the night. I'd even secured a spot to crash in their room, so I didn't have to worry about driving after drinking. By the time the party kicked off, the house was packed. Most of our close-knit friend group showed up, along with a mix of Logan's other friends, people I didn't know. The energy was great, and as midnight approached, everyone was buzzing with excitement. When the clock struck 12, the room erupted in cheers and clinking glasses. "Happy New Year!" echoed through the house, followed by celebratory hugs and shouts of relief that 2020 was finally over. But as the night went on, the crowd began to thin. Some headed to other parties or bars, while others made their way home. By around 3 in the morning, the house was quiet. The only people left were Logan, me, and our friend Cody, who was already half asleep on the couch. The three of us sat in the living room, sipping on the last of our drinks and chatting lazily. It was one of those moments when the energy of the party had completely dissipated, leaving only a calm, relaxed atmosphere. That's when we first heard it, a faint creaking sound. At first, we barely registered it, brushing it off as the fridge or some other harmless appliance noise. But it persisted, soft but rhythmic, as if something was moving. Cody was too out of it to care, but Logan and I exchanged uneasy glances. "Did you hear that?" I asked. "Yeah," Logan said, standing up. "Probably nothing." The sound seemed to come from somewhere nearby, but we couldn't pinpoint it. It wasn't until we approached the kitchen that it became clear the noise was coming from the basement. We stopped in front of the basement door, staring at each other. "You check it," I said, nudging Logan. "No way," he replied. Then, after a moment's hesitation, he opened the door and called down, "Yo, who's down there?" The creaking stopped immediately. We stood there, frozen, listening intently. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Finally, we agreed against our better judgment to go down together. Drunken logic dictated that we arm ourselves, so we each grabbed a kitchen knife before descending the stairs. In hindsight, it was a terrible idea. We were too drunk to be handling knives safely, but at the time, it felt like a necessary precaution. The basement was dimly lit and cluttered with old furniture, a couch, a bar, and various odds and ends. It wasn't large, so it didn't take long to search every corner. There was no sign of anyone. No open windows, no evidence of an intruder. "Maybe it was just the pipes or something," Logan muttered, though his voice lacked conviction. That's when I noticed the rocking chair. It was an old wooden chair in the corner of the basement, covered in a thin layer of dust. It looked like it hadn't been touched in years. Something about it drew me closer. "What if it was this?" I said, sitting in the chair and gently rocking back and forth. The creaking sound it made was identical to what we'd been hearing. Logan's face went pale. I stood up, my heart pounding, and we both backed away from the chair. "You don't think?" Logan began, but he didn't finish the sentence. Every hair on my body stood on end. Without another word, we bolted up the stairs, slamming the basement door behind us. For the rest of the night, we sat in the living room, trying to rationalize what we'd just experienced. Maybe there had been a draft, or maybe the chair had shifted on its own. But deep down, we both knew there was no logical explanation. Logan mentioned that the rocking chair had belonged to his grandmother, who had passed away years ago. His mom kept it for sentimental reasons, but no one ever used it. The idea that something or someone had been rocking that chair while we were upstairs sent chills down my spine. We locked the basement door and didn't go near it for the rest of the weekend. Logan even left it locked until his parents returned days later. I've never been one to believe in the paranormal, and even now, I struggle to make sense of what happened that night. Maybe it was just a coincidence, an odd series of events fueled by our drunken imagination. But every time I think about that rocking chair and the sound it made, I can't shake the feeling that we weren't alone in that basement.
New Year's Eve is supposed to be a time of celebration and new beginnings. But for me, that night served as a haunting reminder that some things can't be explained and some memories refuse to fade.